Most monsters hide in the woods, but the most dangerous ones wear a suit and tie to dinner. In 2011, this movie was so disturbing it caused audience members to collapse at Sundance. Not because of the gore, but because of the mirror it held up to civilized society. Meet Chris Cleek, a family man, a lawyer, and a complete psychopath who finds a feral woman in the wild and decides to civilize her in his cellar. But as the chains tighten, you'll quickly realize the person in the cage isn't the animal. If you think you've seen every twist in the survival genre, stick around. This isn't a rescue mission. It's an autopsy of the human soul. Deep in the forest, a lone woman struggles to survive. A savage wound across her belly bleeds freely, but she presses on, patching herself as best she can. Suddenly, a wolf appears. She snarls back and strikes it down with deadly precision. As she wanders through the woods, visions blur with reality, leading her to a cave where a baby lies hidden. The wolf circles protectively, clearly tamed by her presence. It slowly becomes clear she is the last of a brutal, cannibalistic tribe that once roamed these lands. The scene shifts sharply to a suburban barbecue. Chris Cleek, a respected lawyer, enjoys the sunny afternoon with his family. But his eldest daughter, Peggy, sits apart, withdrawn and uneasy. Nearby, his son Brian notices a girl being bullied, but instead of stepping in, he diverts his attention to a basketball game. Later, when Chris asks about his day, Brian talks only about how many shots he made, ignoring everything else. Returning home, the farmhouse stands isolated, surrounded by thick, dark woods. It's clear Chris rules this household with absolute control. One day, Chris is out hunting in the forest. He spots the wild woman bathing in a river and silently follows her back to her cave. The look on his face reveals his intentions, dark and calculating. Back home, he orders the family to clean the cellar without explanation. That night, he works in secret on a hidden project, leaving Belle and Peggy confused and wary. By morning, he returns to the woods, capturing the woman and knocking her out cold. Chris confines her in a makeshift contraption in the basement. Curious, he puts a finger near her mouth, and immediately she bites it off, swallowing it like a warning. Stunned, Chris knocks her out with several blows, leaving her unconscious. After tending his own wound, he returns and makes one thing clear. In this house, he sets the rules. To enforce control, he fires a gun near her head, and the woman freezes, finally complying, at least for the moment. He introduces her to the family, who are bewildered by her presence. Chris insists they train her, treating her more like an experiment than a person. Brian watches with morbid fascination instead of fear. Chris shows how to safely feed her, offering food like she's an animal. She reacts violently, smashing the dish, but Chris interprets it as part of the learning process. That evening, the youngest daughter, Darling, sits by the cellar door, trying to escape the house's tension with her radio. Chris's wife questions whether it's right to hold her captive, but he silences her with a slap. The next day, Chris goes about his work as usual, appearing calm and charming. Meanwhile, Peggy struggles emotionally, breaking down at school. Down in the basement, the woman, starving, is forced to eat whatever scraps are thrown at her. Brian secretly spies through a small opening, watching her like a spectator at a performance. Chris continues asserting his control, giving orders and expecting blind obedience. Peggy wrestles internally, afraid to speak about the horrors surrounding her. Brian watches through a peephole, planning his own secret actions. Chris begins to clean the woman, treating her injuries with methodical detachment. His wife grows jealous and tense as she observes him handling the woman's body. Outside, they use a pressure washer to clean her, ignoring her screams. Peggy finally intervenes, cutting the machine off, and the woman softly says, "Please," repeatedly. Chris interprets this as progress. Over time, Chris forces her to learn basic manners, rewarding compliance like training a pet. Meanwhile, Peggy's secret emerges. Her teacher suspects she may be pregnant. That night, Chris descends into the basement, with Brian secretly following. What happens next is horrifying. Chris abuses the woman, while Brian watches through a peephole. Belle lies awake, silently witnessing the atrocity, powerless to stop it. The following day, Brian goes down to the basement alone, pretending to bring her food. Instead, he attacks her violently, mutilating her body. Peggy hears the commotion and rushes down, horrified by what she sees. She drives him away and tries to comfort the woman, realizing the depths of the family's corruption. When Chris learns what Brian did, he does nothing to punish him. His wife finally confronts him, threatening to call the police. Chris manipulates her, trapping her in complicity. The argument escalates violently, ending with him physically assaulting her in front of the children. A teacher arrives, concerned about Peggy. Chris commands the room, insisting everyone listen. The teacher reveals her suspicion about Peggy's pregnancy, and Chris snaps. He drags the teacher outside with Brian's help, ignoring Peggy's desperate protests. He humiliates Peggy in front of everyone before turning back to the teacher, leaving chaos in his wake. The teacher is locked in the dog enclosure, where the eyeless girl appears. She attacks the teacher, tearing into her flesh. Meanwhile, Peggy frees the woman from the basement. The woman, finally unleashed, violently kills Chris's wife in a moment of pure vengeance. The house descends into total chaos as the power dynamics of the family collapse. Chris and Brian attempt to regain control, but it's too late. The woman overpowers Brian, killing him with brutal force. Chris tries to draw his gun, but she slaps it aside. She tears out his heart with her own hands and consumes it, leaving him dead. After the carnage, the woman steps outside and encounters the eyeless girl, now calm. She feeds her, forming a bond, and they move together like a team. Peggy and her younger sister attempt to flee, but the truth becomes clear. The eyeless girl is part of the family, hidden due to shame. In the final scenes, the woman leads Darling and Peggy into the woods. As darkness falls, Peggy follows them, unsure what awaits, while the screen fades to black. Watching the woman isn't just a horror experience. It's an uncomfortable look at the God complex. What Jack Ketchum and Lucky McKee did here was brilliant. They took the feral human trope and flipped it. Usually, the wild person is the threat. Here, the feral woman is the only character with a consistent moral code: survival. My biggest critique is the pacing in the second act, but it's intentional. It builds that suffocating, claustrophobic feeling of being trapped in a household where the father is a tyrant. From a psychological perspective, this movie is a masterclass in dehumanization. Chris Cleek doesn't see the woman as a person, but he also doesn't see his wife or daughters as people. They are objects to be controlled. This is an extreme allegory for domestic abuse and the perfect family facade. Notice how the son, Brian, begins to mimic his father's cruelty? That's the cycle of violence in real time. If you're a filmmaker, look at the lighting. The Cleek house is bright, sunny, and clean, while the truth is dark and filthy. It proves you don't need a dark basement to show evil. Evil is often hiding in broad daylight. This movie reminds us that civilization is just a thin coat of paint. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark side of cinema, do me a huge favor: slam that subscribe button. I break down the movies that most people are too afraid to watch twice. Drop a comment below. Who was the real villain of this story? The father, or the society that let him get away with it? I'm Billionz Recaps. Thanks for watching, and stay curious.